Do not ask me to spare you, Omega. The words rolled through the royal trial chamber with such terrible calm that Ira almost laughed, because mercy was the one thing she had stopped expecting. She knelt alone beneath the vaulted stone ceiling while hundreds of nobles watched from the galleries above, their silence heavier than accusation. Cold marble pressed through the thin fabric of her pale sage dress. Her hands trembled in her lap, not because she believed herself guilty, but because she had finally understood that innocence meant nothing when everyone in the room had already decided what the truth should be. At the highest point of the chamber sat King Valdemar. Black armor covered his broad frame, polished metal catching the silver fire of the ceremonial braziers. A heavy fur mantle rested across his shoulders, and a crimson royal cloak spilled beside the throne like a dark river. His long black hair framed a face carved into ruthless stillness. At his side hung the sword of the crown. Once, Ira had believed there was no safer place in the kingdom than beneath the protection of that sword. Now she could barely look at it. The mark has been confirmed, High Seer Celestine announced. Her voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. The Silver Crescent. The crown betrayer's mark, exactly as the Moon Codex foretold. Beneath Ira's sleeve, the mark on her wrist seemed to burn. She had been born with it. She had hidden it for years. She had never understood why until royal guards discovered it, and every ordinary moment of her life became evidence against her. Missing records from the royal archive. A sealed message she had never written. Testimony from people who would not meet her eyes. Each piece had fit the next so perfectly that even Ira had begun to wonder whether someone had designed the accusation long before she ever entered the palace. Your Majesty. Her voice almost failed her. Valdemar's gaze met hers. For one dangerous heartbeat, the chamber disappeared. She remembered quieter moments instead. The night he had placed his cloak around her shoulders when she was shivering outside the archive. The afternoon his wolf had gone strangely still. When she passed him in the corridor. The way he had once told her that a king's greatest duty was not to punish the guilty, but to make certain the innocent never stood where she was standing now. Look at the evidence again, Ira whispered. A murmur moved through the galleries. Celestine stiffened. Ira ignored her. She looked only at Valdemar. Please. Not at me. Not at what they say I am. Look at the evidence. His jaw tightened. Something painful moved behind his eyes, so quickly she nearly imagined it. Then his expression hardened. The royal trial has spoken. Those 5 words hurt more than the accusations. Ira's breathing slowed. She understood then. He was not choosing Celestine. He was not even choosing against Ira. He was choosing the law because he believed the law could not lie. Valdemar reached for the judgment placed before him. His hand paused above it. Ira watched that hand because suddenly nothing else in the world mattered. You once told me the law existed to protect the innocent, she said softly. His fingers curled around the royal seal. And the law cannot bow to emotion. The seal came down. The sound echoed through the chamber. Ira closed her eyes. There was no rage left inside her. Only grief, deep and strangely quiet. She did not curse Celestine. She did not beg the court. She did not ask Valdemar to change his mind again. When the guards approached, Ira rose without their help. If the kingdom demanded that she leave this world branded a traitor, then at least she would meet its judgment standing. Yet when she reached the doors, she looked back once. Valdemar was no longer watching her. The Alpha King had turned his face away. That was the image she carried into the darkness. Not the trial. Not the accusing crowd. Him. The man she had trusted refusing to look at what his decision had done. Then came silence. Ira expected nothing after it. Instead, she heard rain. Soft at first. Then harder, tapping against glass. Her eyes opened. She was lying in a narrow bed beneath a wool blanket, staring at the familiar wooden beams of a room that no longer existed. Ira stopped breathing. Slowly, she raised her hand. No restraints. No judgment bracelet. No scar left by the royal trial. Only pale skin and, beneath the edge of her sleeve, the Silver Crescent. She stumbled from the bed and crossed to the small mirror beside the window. A young woman stared back at her, brown blonde hair falling loose around a face untouched by months of fear. On the table lay a folded notice from the Royal Archive. Ira seized it. The date stole the strength from her knees. 6 months. She had returned 6 months before her execution. A knock sounded at the door. Ira froze. Somewhere beyond it, a familiar voice called her name, belonging to someone who had smiled at her before helping send her to trial. In her first life, fear had taught Ira to run. She had hidden, pleaded, and waited for powerful people to decide whether she deserved to survive. Her fingers closed around the notice. Not again. But the thought carried no hunger for revenge. She wanted something simpler than vengeance. She wanted her life. And this time, she would learn who had taken it from her before they had the chance to do it again. 3 days later, wearing the plain blue-gray dress of a court copyist and carrying papers belonging to a woman named Elia, Ira crossed the gates of the royal palace. Every step toward the throne room felt like walking willingly into a memory that had already killed her once. She kept her head lowered when the great doors opened. She told herself not to look at the throne. Then the room fell strangely quiet. Ira felt it before she understood it, the weight of a gaze fixed entirely upon her. Against every instinct, she looked up. King Valdemar stood 20 feet away in black armor and crimson, his hand resting beside the sword at his hip. His face had gone perfectly still. His wolf stirred behind his eyes. And the Alpha King stared at the disguised Omega as though some forgotten part of him had just recognized a woman he had already lost. Elia had been inside the royal palace for less than a minute, and already the Alpha King was looking at her as if her disguise had failed. Ira lowered her eyes before fear could betray her. Around her, scribes and servants continued moving across the enormous hall. Unaware that beneath her plain blue-gray dress and carefully pinned brown blonde hair stood a woman who remembered dying under this very roof. Your name. Valdemar's voice stopped her. Ira's fingers tightened around the documents she carried. In another life, that voice had spoken her sentence with unbearable calm. Now it held only suspicion. She forced herself to turn. Elia, Your Majesty. The false name felt heavy on her tongue. Valdemar studied her for another moment. He was exactly as memory had preserved him, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black royal armor beneath a heavy fur mantle, his crimson cloak falling behind him. Yet something was different. There was no judgment in his eyes because, to him, she had committed no crime. Not yet. Have we met? He asked. Ira's heart stumbled. No, Your Majesty. The lie came quickly. Valdemar's expression barely changed, but something restless moved behind his gaze. His wolf. Ira remembered that strange stillness from her first life, long before either of them understood what it meant. She bowed and left before he could question her again. For the next several days, she made herself invisible. She copied trade agreements, organized petitions, and memorized which guards changed shifts near the Royal Archive. She never stayed in one corridor too long. She never asked directly about the Moon Codex. Most importantly, she avoided Valdemar. It should have been easy. A king had no reason to notice a low-ranking copyist. Then Ira found the mistake. A royal decree on her desk transferred winter grazing rights between 2 northern packs, but one boundary marker had been copied incorrectly. A single altered name shifted nearly 12 square miles of land. In her previous life, the error had triggered months of hostility before the crown corrected it. Ira stared at the parchment. She had promised herself she would change nothing unnecessarily. Every difference made her memories less useful. If she remained silent, she protected her disguise. If she corrected it, she might prevent suffering that had not happened yet. Her hand hovered over the page. She remembered the council elders she had once heard blaming the crown for allowing a simple clerical error to divide neighbors. Ira closed her eyes. Survival could not require becoming indifferent. She marked the mistake. By sunset, 2 royal guards appeared beside her desk. The king requests your presence. Her stomach turned cold. Valdemar waited in a private council chamber, the corrected decree spread across a table. You found this? Yes, Your Majesty. 3 senior clerks reviewed it before you. Ira kept her breathing even. Then they missed it. For the first time, something almost like surprise crossed his face. You are unusually direct for someone who spends every conversation trying not to be noticed. Ira said nothing. Valdemar stepped closer, then stopped. His entire body suddenly went rigid. A low, involuntary sound rose in his chest before he suppressed it. Ira knew that sound. His wolf had made it once before, years later in a life only she remembered. Valdemar's eyes sharpened. What are you? The question struck deeper than it should have. A copyist. That was not what I asked. Ira lifted her chin despite the fear pressing against her ribs. Then I do not know how to answer. Silence stretched between them. Valdemar could have ordered her searched. He could have summoned the guards. Instead, he returned to the table. This correction prevented a dispute between 2 packs. He placed his hand over the decree. Beginning tomorrow, you will work with the royal correspondence staff. Ira's composure cracked. Your Majesty, that is unnecessary. You disagree with a promotion? I am useful where I am. You are useful where I decide you are needed. The words should have sounded arrogant. Instead they terrified her because royal correspondence worked less than 50 feet from the sealed archive. The opportunity she needed had just been handed to her by the man she was trying desperately to avoid. Thank you, Your Majesty. She bowed and left. Valdemar watched the door close behind her. The unfamiliar ache beneath his ribs remained. His wolf paced inside him with an agitation he had not felt in years. A stranger, he told himself. A false name attached to an ordinary Omega who had noticed an error. Nothing more. Yet when he remembered the fear in her eyes, he felt something darker than suspicion. She had not looked afraid of a powerful king. She had looked afraid of him personally. Valdemar turned toward Captain Torin, who had been waiting silently near the far wall. Elia, the king said. Find out where she came from. Torin nodded. How far back? Valdemar looked toward the closed door. As far as you can. 2 days later, Torin returned carrying a thin folder. Valdemar opened it and immediately frowned. Elia had employment papers. She had references. She even had a village listed as her birthplace. But before 6 months ago, there was nothing. No tax record. No family registration. No temple record. No childhood record. It was as if Elia had appeared in the kingdom at the exact moment Ira had awakened in her second life. The first thing Ira learned about changing the future was that the future noticed. 3 mornings after Valdemar moved her into royal correspondence, she found herself standing before a locked iron door in the Eastern Archive while Senior Archivist Heloise watched her with pale, unsettled eyes. Ira had remembered Heloise as a quiet woman who rarely spoke above a whisper, but she had forgotten how carefully the older woman observed everything. Those records are sealed, Heloise said. I was looking for old trial procedures. Copyists do not study trial procedures. Ira forced her hand away from the sleeve covering her wrist. I like knowing the laws I copy. Heloise's gaze followed the movement. For one dangerous second, the edge of the Silver Crescent appeared beneath the fabric. The color drained from Heloise's face. Where did you get that mark? Ira went still. I was born with it. Heloise stepped closer, then abruptly stopped herself. Cover it. Why? Because some questions are safer unanswered. She turned away, but Ira caught her arm before she could leave. Have you seen it before? Heloise looked toward the empty corridor. Fear transformed her features. I have seen something like it. Hope struck Ira so suddenly that it hurt. Where? On a page that no longer exists. Before Ira could ask another question, footsteps sounded beyond the shelves. Heloise pulled free and disappeared between the towering bookcases. Ira covered her wrist just as Celestine entered the corridor. The High Seer's expression was warm enough to fool anyone who had never watched her stand beside an execution platform. "Elia," she said. "You seem interested in old things." Ira bowed. "Only my work." Celestine smiled. "Of course." She continued past her, but Ira felt the woman's attention remain long after she was gone. That afternoon, the Royal Council assembled to discuss the northern boundary decree Ira had corrected. She sat against the wall with the other clerks, recording statements while Valdemar presided from the head of the table. Ira recognized every face. In her first life, she had spent months learning which of them would look away when she was accused. Then Council Elder Marius lifted his cup. Ira smelled bitter almonds beneath the spiced cider. Her body reacted before thought. Cold marble beneath her knees. Celestine's voice reading charges. A sealed evidence vial carrying that same faint scent. Ira's pen slipped from her fingers. This was wrong. Marius had not fallen ill until months later. The timeline had moved. "Do not drink that." Every head turned. Marius paused with the cup inches from his mouth. Celestine's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Valdemar rose. "Explain yourself." Ira could still retreat. She could apologize. She could protect Elia. Instead she crossed the chamber, took the cup, and placed it on the table. "There is something in it." Torin stepped forward. "How would a copyist know that?" Ira looked at the cider. That was the question she had feared. "I recognize the smell." "From where?" She could not say. "From evidence presented at my execution in a life none of you remember. From an apothecary where I once worked." Another lie. Torin removed the cup for examination. The meeting dissolved into uneasy whispers. Before sunset, the palace healer confirmed that Ira had prevented Marius from swallowing a dangerous substance. She had saved him. She had also exposed herself. Valdemar found her alone outside the council chamber. "You knew before my guards." "Did." "Yes." "You noticed something my healer did not notice from across the table." Ira kept her gaze lowered. "Yes." "And you expect me to believe you are merely a copyist?" She said nothing. Valdemar moved closer, stopping several feet away as though he had learned that distance mattered to her. "I investigated you." Ira's heart tightened. "There is no Elia before 6 months ago." Silence passed between them. "Who are you?" he asked. Ira raised her eyes. For a moment she saw the king from her last life, waiting for her answer beneath the cold light of the royal trial. But this Valdemar had not condemned her. Not yet. Someone trying to stay alive. His expression changed. Not softer. More troubled. Before he could answer, Torin entered with a small evidence pouch. Inside lay the wax seal taken from the container that had held the tainted cider. Dark red wax. Royal Archive grade. One corner of the crest was missing. Ira stared at that tiny defect and felt the room tilt. She knew that seal. She had seen the same broken crest on the forged letter used against her at her trial. Across the palace, Celestine stood before a fire while a servant waited for instructions. She had expected Elia to ignore the cup. She had expected an ordinary frightened Omega to protect herself. Instead the girl had recognized a threat months before she should have known it existed. Celestine slowly folded a sheet of parchment and fed it to the flames. Until that moment, Elia had merely been inconvenient. Now she was impossible. "Find out everything she has touched in the archives," Celestine said. "And do not underestimate her again." By morning, the story spreading through the palace was no longer that Elia had saved a council elder. It was that a mysterious Omega had known about the danger before anyone else. Ira heard the whispers follow her through the eastern corridor. Spy. Poisoner. Witch. The words were different from those used at her first trial, but the feeling beneath them was horribly familiar. Fear wanted a simple explanation, and powerless women made convenient ones. When two royal guards appeared outside the correspondence chamber, Ira already knew why they had come. "The council has requested your detention," one said. Her pulse quickened. For an instant, the corridor disappeared. She felt cold marble beneath her knees and heard Valdemar declare that the royal trial had spoken. She forced herself back into the present. On what charge? Suspicion of involvement in the attempt against Elder Marius. Ira almost smiled at the cruelty of it. She had saved him, and somehow even that had become evidence against her. The guards stepped forward. "Stop." Valdemar's voice came from behind them. Everyone bowed. The Alpha King approached in black armor and crimson, his expression unreadable. Torin walked at his side carrying the evidence pouch with the damaged red seal. "Your Majesty," one guard said carefully, "the council authorized us to hold her until the inquiry." "The council advises the crown," Valdemar replied. "It does not imprison people without evidence." Ira stared at him. In her first life, he had trusted procedure because he believed procedure protected truth. Now he was standing between her and that same machinery before it could close around her. "She knew the cup was dangerous," the guard said. "Which is why Elder Marius is alive." Valdemar looked at Ira. "Until I know who placed that substance in the council chamber, Elia is under royal protection." The words moved through her like winter. Royal protection. Safety should not have frightened her. But safety had his face. His voice. His authority. The guards withdrew. Ira waited until they were alone except for Torin. "You should not have done that." Valdemar's brow lowered. "Protected an innocent woman? You do not know that I am innocent. Neither does the council know that you are guilty." The answer struck somewhere she had spent months teaching herself not to feel. Valdemar turned to Torin. "Open a formal inquiry. Start with everyone who had access to the council chamber, then trace the wax." Torin nodded. "Including royal offices?" "Especially royal offices." That decision mattered. Ira knew it immediately. In her first life, no one had questioned evidence bearing a royal seal. Now Valdemar had ordered his own captain to investigate it. The future shifted beneath her feet again. Royal protection moved Ira from the servants' wing to a guarded room near the royal apartments. She hated every inch of it. The carpets were too soft. The corridors were too quiet. Valdemar was too close. That night she woke from a dream with her hand pressed against her throat and the echo of the trial bell in her ears. She left her room because the walls felt too narrow. Valdemar found her beside an open balcony overlooking the moonlit courtyard. He had removed his armor, though his sword remained at his side. Ira instinctively stepped backward. He stopped immediately. That small act unsettled her more than if he had continued. "You are afraid of me," he said. "You are the Alpha King. Most people are. Not like this." Ira looked toward the courtyard. "You are imagining things. When the guards approached you this morning, you looked at me." She said nothing. "Not at them. At me." His voice lowered. "As if you were waiting to see what I would decide." Ira remembered another chamber, another decision, another version of him lowering the royal seal. Her chest tightened. She moved toward the doorway. Valdemar did not touch her. Still, when she passed within several feet of him, something inside him reacted. His wolf surged with such sudden force that he caught the stone railing. Ira felt an answering pull beneath her ribs, ancient and unwanted. She froze. Valdemar stared at her, disturbed by his own reaction. "What was that?" "Nothing. Do not lie to me." The command sharpened his voice, and Ira flinched before she could stop herself. Valdemar's anger vanished instantly. He looked at her as though that single movement had wounded him in a place he could not name. "I have never harmed you," he said. Ira nearly laughed, but grief rose instead. "Not in this life," she thought. "Not yet. Your Majesty, please let me return to my room." He stepped aside. She reached the doorway before his voice stopped her again. "Elia." Ira closed her eyes. "Whoever taught you to fear this palace," Valdemar said, "I intend to find them." She turned slowly. Moonlight caught the hard lines of his face, and for the first time she saw not the king who had condemned her, but a man standing before consequences he did not yet remember creating. Valdemar studied the terror she could no longer completely hide. His wolf was restless again, not with aggression, but with something disturbingly close to grief. Then he asked the question Ira had feared since the moment she returned. "Why do you look at me as if I have already killed you?" For several seconds, Ira could not answer him. Valdemar's question remained between them, quiet and devastating, because there was no lie simple enough to explain why she remembered his judgment better than he remembered her name. "Some fears do not belong to the person standing in front of you," she finally said. "Sometimes they belong to what that person represents." Valdemar watched her carefully. "And what do I represent to you?" Ira looked at the royal sword at his side, then at the crimson cloak falling from his shoulders. "A decision I cannot afford to trust." She left before he could stop her. By morning, Heloise had sent a message asking Ira to meet in the oldest section of the royal archive. The senior archivist waited between shelves untouched by daylight, her hands clasped tightly around a ring of iron keys. "I should not be helping you," Heloise whispered. "Then why are you?" "Because I spent too many years convincing myself that silence was the same as innocence." She led Ira to a narrow alcove containing ceremonial records from previous reigns. "When I was young, I helped restore a damaged copy of the Moon Codex. There was an illustration beside the section concerning royal oaths. A silver crescent." Ira's pulse quickened. "The crown betrayer's mark." Heloise shook her head. "That is not what I remember." Ira stared at her. "What did it mean?" "I never read the entire passage. The folio was removed before restoration was finished." Heloise looked toward the corridor. But the symbol was not drawn beside a warning. It was beside an oath. Footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the shelves. Heloise immediately stepped away. "There is a sealed collection beneath the Western Archive. If the original folio survived, it may be there." "How do I enter?" Heloise hesitated. "You do not. The door is protected by a moon lock." Ira waited until after midnight. Royal protection meant 2 guards remained outside her room, but it also meant her movements inside the royal wing attracted fewer questions. She reached the Western Archive through a servant's passage she remembered from her first life. The sealed door stood behind an old tapestry, its dark surface marked by a circular silver mechanism. Ira touched it. Heat flashed beneath her sleeve. She pulled back, startled. The silver crescent on her wrist had begun to glow. "So that is what you have been hiding." Valdemar's voice came from the darkness. Ira spun around. He stood several feet away, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. Her first instinct was to cover the mark. Then she stopped. He had already seen it. "Are you going to call the guards?" she asked. Valdemar looked from her wrist to the moon lock. "Should I?" "According to your laws, yes. My laws say that mark belongs to a traitor." His gaze shifted to the silver mechanism, which was now glowing in answer to her skin. "My eyes are telling me something else." Ira's breath caught. That sentence would never have existed in her first life. Valdemar stepped toward the lock. Ira instinctively moved back, and again he noticed. Again he stopped before entering the distance she feared. "You came here looking for something," he said. "I came looking for the truth." "About the mark?" About why people like you believe it makes me guilty. His expression tightened at people like you, but he did not challenge her. Then we want the same thing. Ira almost rejected the words. Trust had killed her once. Hope had helped. Yet before she could answer, voices sounded at the end of the corridor. Royal guards. Valdemar looked at her uncovered wrist, then removed his heavy cloak and placed it around her shoulders without touching her skin. The crimson fabric concealed the glowing mark completely. The gesture struck Ira with a memory so gentle it was almost cruel. Another evening, another corridor, Valdemar placing his cloak around her because she was cold. Before the trial. Before everything. The guards rounded the corner and bowed. Your Majesty. High Seer Celestine ordered the Western Archive inspected. Someone was seen entering. Valdemar did not look at Ira. I ordered the inspection. The guards hesitated. And the copyist? She is assisting me. It was a lie. A king had just lied to his own guards to protect an Omega accused of deception. When they left, Ira slowly removed the cloak. Why? She whispered. Valdemar looked at her as though he did not entirely understand his own answer. Then his wolf surged. His eyes flashed with recognition so fierce that Ira felt an answering pull beneath her ribs. One word seemed to move through him before he could stop it. Luna. Silence swallowed the corridor. Valdemar went completely still. Ira's heart pounded. He looked almost angry with himself, but beneath the confusion was something deeper, something that felt like grief searching for a memory. I do not know why my wolf called you that, he said. Ira wrapped her sleeve over the Silver Crescent. Then forget it. She turned away. Valdemar caught himself before reaching for her. Elia. She stopped. If the law says you are dangerous, but everything I have seen tells me the law is wrong, then perhaps I have been asking the wrong question. Ira looked back. What question will you ask now? His gaze settled on the mark hidden beneath her sleeve. Who needed the kingdom to believe that mark meant treason? Neither of them noticed the shadow beyond the far archway retreat into darkness. By dawn, Celestine had received the report. The moon lock had awakened. The Alpha King had concealed it. And the nameless copyist was no longer merely searching the archives. She was leading Valdemar toward a truth Celestine had buried 12 years ago. Before sunrise, Celestine placed 3 documents on the council table, proof that Elia's identity was false, proof that she had entered the sealed archive, and an ancient law declaring the Silver Crescent the mark of a crowned betrayer. This time, she would not test the Omega. She would expose her. The summons came before breakfast. Ira knew what waited for her before the guard finished speaking, because the palace had acquired the same unnatural silence she remembered from the beginning of her first downfall. By the time she entered the council chamber, every seat was occupied. Valdemar stood beside the throne rather than sitting upon it, his black armor catching the pale morning light. Celestine waited across from him with 3 documents arranged neatly on the long table. Torin remained near the doors, his expression guarded. Elia, Celestine said, almost gently. Or should I say, whoever you truly are? Ira felt every gaze turned toward her. Celestine lifted the first document. The village named on her employment papers has no record of her birth. The second followed. She entered a sealed royal archive without authorization. Then Celestine placed the 3rd document before Valdemar. And she bears the Silver Crescent, identified by the Moon Codex as the mark of a crowned betrayer. Whispers spread around the chamber. Ira looked at Valdemar. For one terrible instant, time folded over itself. She saw the man from her first life standing above her while evidence accumulated piece by piece. She remembered waiting for him to notice that every accusation fit too perfectly. Valdemar picked up the documents. His face revealed nothing. Is your name Elia? He asked. Ira could lie again. The disguise had protected her long enough to reach the archive, but every lie she added would now become another weapon in Celestine's hands. No. The room erupted in murmurs. Valdemar's jaw tightened. Did you enter the sealed archive? Yes. Did you conceal the mark on your wrist? Yes. Celestine turned toward the council. She has confessed to deception, unlawful entry, and concealment of a forbidden mark. Ira felt the old instinct rising inside her. Explain. Plead. Convince him before he chooses them. She looked at Valdemar and saw disappointment in his eyes. It hurt more than she wanted it to. Why did you lie to me? He asked. Not to the council. To me. Ira reached beneath the collar of her dress and removed the small pin holding her hair differently than she had worn it before her rebirth. Then she wiped away the faint herbal pigment Heloise's assistants used to darken her brows and alter the impression of her features. There was no magical transformation, only the careful disappearance of Elia. Her brown blonde hair fell loose around her shoulders. Because Elia was never supposed to survive, she said. She was supposed to get me close enough to learn why Ira did not. Valdemar became motionless. Ira. Hearing her true name in his voice sent a tremor through her. Celestine's composure changed for only a fraction of a second, but Ira saw it. Recognition. Not of a reborn woman, but of a name that should not yet have mattered. That tiny reaction told Ira more than any confession could have. You know that name, Ira said. Celestine recovered immediately. I know many names recorded by the crown. Then perhaps you remember why mine frightened you before I had committed any crime. The council stirred. Celestine's expression cooled. This performance changes nothing. By ancient law, a bearer of the Silver Crescent accused of deception against the crown must face royal trial. The word struck Ira like the tolling of a distant bell. Royal trial. 6 months early. Her decisions had changed the timeline, but they had not destroyed the path leading toward that chamber. They had only shortened it. Valdemar looked at Celestine. On whose authority do you demand a trial? The Codex. The same Codex contradicted by the moon lock last night? Silence fell. Celestine had not expected him to say it publicly. Neither had Ira. Valdemar placed the ancient law back on the table. I will not condemn someone because a page tells me not to question it. Ira's breath caught. In another life, he had said the law could not bow to emotion. Now the first fracture had appeared in that belief. But Celestine was prepared. Then refuse the trial, she said. And let every pack in the kingdom hear that its Alpha King abandoned sacred law for an Omega whose name, history, and purpose remain hidden. The trap was elegant. If Valdemar stopped the proceeding by royal command, Celestine would turn his protection of Ira into evidence of corruption. Valdemar understood it. So did Ira. His gaze found hers. If I permit this trial, every piece of evidence will be examined. Every witness will answer questions. Nothing will be accepted because tradition says it must be. Ira remembered him signing her judgment. She remembered dying while wishing he had said exactly those words. The pain of hearing them now almost broke her. Then permit it, she said. Valdemar stared at her. Ira. Do not save me from the room where the lie began. Her voice steadied. Help me expose it. Celestine's eyes sharpened. Valdemar finally nodded. The royal trial will convene. Ira expected fear. Instead she felt something colder and stronger settle inside her. In her first life, she had entered that chamber accused, frightened, and begging powerful people to believe her. This time, she would enter knowing someone had built the accusation before she ever deserved it. Celestine turned away, satisfied that the law had returned to her control. She did not see Torin watching the damaged red seal among the documents on the table. She did not see Valdemar studying the torn edge of the Codex page. And she did not see Ira looking at her with sudden certainty. The trial was no longer something Ira needed to escape. It was the one place where every lie would finally have to stand beside the truth. The royal trial chamber remembered her. Ira felt at the moment the doors opened and the cold air touched her face. The vaulted ceiling, the silver braziers, the galleries crowded with nobles, even the pale marble beneath her shoes were exactly as they had been on the final day of her first life. For one terrible heartbeat, her body forgot that she had returned. Her knees weakened. Her lungs refused to fill. Then she saw the place where she had once knelt, and something inside her steadied. She walked past it. Valdemar sat above the chamber in black royal armor, his crimson cloak falling beside the throne. Celestine stood before the council with the Moon Codex open in her hands. "Ira," she announced, "you stand accused of entering the royal court under a false identity, unlawfully seeking sealed records, concealing the Silver Crescent, and deceiving the crown." The accusations echoed almost perfectly against Ira's memories. She looked toward Valdemar. He was watching her, but this time he did not look away. "According to sacred law," Celestine continued, "the accused will kneel before judgment." A court attendant gestured toward the center of the chamber. Ira stared at the marble. She remembered its coldness through her dress. She remembered pleading from that exact place while hundreds watched. Her hands began to tremble. She closed them into fists. "No." The chamber fell silent. Celestine's eyes hardened. "You refuse the authority of the royal trial?" "I refuse to kneel before evidence that has not yet proved anything." A murmur spread through the galleries. Celestine turned toward Valdemar. "Your Majesty, this contempt alone demonstrates her disregard for royal law." Valdemar leaned forward. "Standing is not treason." Celestine's mouth tightened. Ira drew a slow breath. "I request the full moon blood oath." This time even the council went silent. Heloise, seated among the archived witnesses, lifted her head sharply. Celestine recovered first. "That rite has not been performed in generations. It remains in the law. You have already admitted deception. Then the oath should make your case easier." Ira met Celestine's gaze. "Unless there is something about the old rite you do not want this court to see." The challenge landed exactly where Ira intended. Celestine could refuse, but refusal would make the entire chamber wonder why. Valdemar looked toward the open codex. "Is the rite lawful?" Celestine hesitated. "Yes." "Then she may invoke it." An attendant brought the moon stone from its ceremonial vault. It was smaller than Ira remembered, a smooth disk of pale stone set inside a silver frame. A thin silver fracture crossed its center. The sight triggered another memory, her first trial, Celestine insisting that the simpler oath was sufficient. Ira had never been allowed near this stone. Now she understood that had not been an accident. The moon stone was placed before her. "Once begun, the oath cannot be withdrawn," Celestine warned. Ira looked at Valdemar. His face remained controlled, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. "If this proves the codex correct," he said quietly, "I may not be able to protect you." Ira almost smiled. "That is why I am doing it." She turned back to the court. "I did not return here to be protected from the truth." Celestine flinched at the word return, but no one else noticed. Ira uncovered her wrist. Gasps moved through the galleries as the Silver Crescent appeared. She placed her hand against the moon stone. Nothing happened. Then warmth spread through her palm. The mark began to shine. The silver fracture inside the stone answered with a soft glow. Celestine stepped backward. "Remove her hand." Valdemar's gaze snapped toward her. "Why?" "The rite is unstable. You said it was sacred law." The glow strengthened. Lines of silver traveled across the moon stone, forming an intricate symbol around Ira's hand. The shape was unmistakable. A crescent surrounded by an ancient oath circle. Not the jagged traitor symbol illustrated in the open codex. Heloise rose from her seat. "I remember that." Celestine turned sharply. "Sit down." Heloise did not. Her voice trembled, but she continued. "That is the symbol from the missing folio." The room erupted. Valdemar descended from the throne and approached the moonstone. His wolf pressed so strongly beneath his control that Ira could feel its presence answering her own. "Silence," he commanded. The chamber obeyed. He looked at Heloise. "What folio?" Heloise swallowed. "A page I helped restore when I was young." The Silver Crescent appeared beside the ancient oath rite. Then the page disappeared. Celestine closed the codex. The memory of an elderly archivist cannot overturn sacred text. "No," Ira said. "But the original page can." Celestine's face changed. Only slightly. It was enough. Valdemar saw it too. He turned toward Torin. "Seal every archive exit." Celestine stepped forward. "Your Majesty, you are allowing an accused Omega to dictate this trial." Valdemar looked at the glowing moonstone, then at the codex whose illustration contradicted it. "No. I am allowing evidence to dictate it." Ira felt the words move through her with painful force. In another life, he had believed law could not lie. Now he was looking directly at proof that someone had taught the law to do exactly that. Heloise suddenly gripped the edge of her seat. "The Western Restoration Vault," she whispered. "When a sacred folio was removed for replacement, the damaged original was never destroyed. Royal archivists sealed it beneath the Restoration Vault." Torin looked to Valdemar. The Alpha King did not hesitate. "Bring me the original folio." The original folio returned to the royal trial chamber inside a cedar case that had not been opened in 12 years. Torin carried it himself, with Heloise walking beside him and 2 royal archivists following as witnesses. No one spoke as the case was placed before Valdemar. Ira could hear her own heartbeat. Celestine stared at the box as though it contained something far more dangerous than parchment. "This proves nothing," she said. "Then you have nothing to fear from opening it," Valdemar replied. Heloise unlocked the case. Inside lay a faded folio with a torn triangular edge. Ira's gaze moved immediately to the Moon Codex on the trial table. Its corresponding page carried the same shape along the binding, but the fibers did not match. Replacement and original. Valdemar saw it too. Heloise carefully unfolded the ancient page. There, beside the full moon oath, was the Silver Crescent surrounded by the same circle now glowing within the moonstone. Heloise read the old passage aloud. The mark did not identify a crown betrayer. It identified a truth-bearer, an Omega whose blood could awaken the moon oath when testimony or evidence had been corrupted. The chamber became so silent that Ira heard Celestine inhale. 12 years of law changed meaning in a single breath. Ira looked at the mark on her wrist. All her life she had hidden it as though she carried shame beneath her skin. In her first life, it had helped condemn her. But the mark had never accused her. It had been designed to expose the accusation itself. "The current codex says the opposite," a councilman whispered. "Because someone changed it," Heloise said. Celestine moved suddenly toward the table. Her hand reached for the original folio, but Torin stepped between her and the cedar case. He did not draw his weapon. He did not need to. "High Seer," he said. "Step away." Celestine froze. Torin placed the damaged red wax seal from Elder Marius's case beside several restoration records he had gathered during the inquiry. The same missing corner marked each impression. This seal belonged to the office that authorized the replacement folio 12 years ago. His gaze settled on Celestine. "Your office." A wave of disbelief passed through the court. Celestine's calm finally fractured. "I protected this kingdom." Ira understood before the woman said another word. "From me? From what your kind could do to royal authority." Celestine looked around the chamber, desperate now to make them understand. A truth-bearer could challenge evidence accepted by the crown. One marked Omega could overturn judgments, weaken sacred law, and turn every trial into doubt. Valdemar's expression became cold. "So you changed the law." Celestine said nothing. She did not need to. The truth had already reached the room. Ira felt no triumph. Only a deep grief for the woman she had been, the frightened Omega who had believed her death meant there was something wrong with her. Valdemar turned toward Ira. The oath is not complete. The moon stone still glowed between them. Heloise nodded. The truth-bearer must make the declaration before the sovereign. If the sovereign joins the oath, the stone confirms whether the accusation was built upon corrupted evidence. Valdemar approached. Ira's body tensed automatically. He noticed and stopped. "May I?" he asked. A king asking permission. The smallest thing, yet it nearly broke her. Ira nodded. Valdemar placed his hand on the opposite side of the moonstone. Silver light moved beneath his palm. His wolf surged toward hers, and the bond Ira had spent 2 lives fearing opened before either of them could retreat. Valdemar stopped breathing. He saw marble beneath Ira's knees. He heard Celestine call her traitor. He saw Ira looking up at him, not asking for mercy, only asking him to examine the evidence again. Then he heard his own voice. The royal trial has spoken. He felt the royal seal beneath his hand. He saw himself choose certainty because doubt frightened a king responsible for an entire kingdom. He watched Ira rise alone after he signed the judgment. And then came the memory that destroyed whatever remained of his composure. Ira looking back at him one final time. Valdemar turning his face away. The moonstone dimmed. His hand fell from it. The Alpha King staggered 1 step backward, staring at Ira as though the woman before him had become both living miracle and unbearable accusation. "I remember," he whispered. Ira's eyes filled, but she did not move toward him. "No," she said softly. "You saw." The difference struck him. Memory belonged to her. He had only been allowed to witness what she had carried alone. Valdemar looked toward the throne, then toward the judgment table where another version of himself had once chosen law over the woman standing before him. "I signed it." His voice broke on the words. No one in the chamber moved. Ira had imagined this moment during sleepless nights after her rebirth. She had imagined anger. Vindication. Perhaps satisfaction. Instead she felt tired. "You were deceived," she said. Valdemar met her gaze. "And I still made the decision." That answer mattered more than an excuse ever could. He turned to the court. "Ira is innocent. Every accusation founded upon the altered codex is suspended, and every judgment made under that passage will be reviewed." Then Valdemar did something no one in the royal court had ever seen an Alpha King do before an Omega. He descended from the judgment platform, removed the authority of height between them, and lowered himself before the woman his decision had once condemned. Ira stared down at him. In her first life, she had been the one kneeling. This time, the king was. For the first time in Ira's 2 lives, the royal trial chamber did not know what to do with silence. Valdemar remained before her, one knee against the same pale marble where she had once been ordered to kneel, while nobles, counselors, guards, and witnesses stared at their king. Ira had imagined justice many times after waking in her second life. She had imagined Celestine exposed, her own name cleared, perhaps even Valdemar finally understanding what his decision had cost. She had never imagined feeling this quiet. "Stand," Ira said. Valdemar looked up. "Please." He rose, but he did not return to the throne. "I cannot undo what you saw," he said. "No. I cannot return the life my decision took from you." Ira held his gaze. "No." Pain crossed his face, but he did not ask her to soften the truth. That mattered. Valdemar turned toward the court. "Let the record show that Ira entered this chamber falsely accused. Let it also show that the crown accepted a corrupted law because generations of rulers, including me, trusted tradition more than scrutiny." Celestine stood under Torin's watch near the council table. "You would weaken the crown for her," she demanded. Valdemar's expression hardened. A crown that requires a lie to remain strong deserves to be weakened. Heloise lowered her eyes. Your Majesty, there is more. Her voice shook. I remembered the missing folio for years. I told myself I had not seen enough to challenge the Codex. I was afraid of losing my position. She looked at Ira. My silence helped protect the lie. Ira could have condemned her. Instead she saw an old woman finally choosing courage after years of fear. Then do not be silent again, Ira said. Heloise nodded through tears. The full moon oath was invoked once more, this time for Celestine. With the original folio restored beside the moonstone, the High Seer's own records were examined under the law she had manipulated. Restoration orders, archive seals, altered entries, and testimony connected one decision to another until denial became impossible. Valdemar did not announce punishment in anger. He ordered Celestine stripped of authority and placed under lawful judgment, with every case influenced by the altered passage opened for review. Then he issued a second decree. No sacred legal text would again be controlled by a single office. Royal trials would require independent archivists, counsel witnesses, and examination of original records whenever a defendant challenged evidence. And no mark, bloodline, rank, or status will be accepted as proof of guilt, Valdemar said. His gaze found Ira. Not while I wear this crown. The court slowly rose. Ira stiffened, expecting another ritual she did not understand. Then she realized they were standing for her. Counselors who had whispered traitor. Nobles who had watched her enter under accusation. Guards who had once been prepared to detain her. One by one, they stood as the restored record was read aloud. Ira, bearer of the Silver Crescent, is recognized before the crown as innocent. Her throat tightened. In her first life, she had wanted those words more desperately than anything. Now she understood that innocence had always belonged to her, even when no one powerful had recognized it. After the chamber emptied, Ira walked toward the great doors. Valdemar followed but stopped several feet behind her. Ira. She turned. He had removed his royal mantle. Without the throne, the court, and the symbols of judgment surrounding him, he looked less like the Alpha King from her nightmares and more like a man carrying the knowledge of a terrible choice. My wolf calls you Luna, he said. The bond recognizes you. None of that gives me a right to you. Ira said nothing. If you leave this palace today, no guard will follow you. If you leave the kingdom, no order will bring you back. If you never forgive me, I will still spend the rest of my reign making certain what happened to you cannot happen to someone else. Something inside her finally loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the absence of fear. In my first life, she said, I kept waiting for you to choose me. Valdemar's eyes closed briefly. I know. I do not want that life again. Neither do I. Ira looked through the open doors. Morning sunlight stretched across the corridor beyond them. 6 months ago, she had returned believing survival meant escaping the future. Instead she had changed it by walking directly toward the place she feared most. She stepped through the doors. Valdemar did not reach for her. He did not command her to remain. After several steps, Ira stopped and looked back. Are you coming? The surprise on his face was almost painful to see. If you want me to. Walk beside me, she said. Not ahead. Valdemar crossed the distance, stopping at her side. Together they moved through the palace, neither ruler nor condemned woman, neither claimant nor claimed. Behind them, the royal trial chamber remained open as archivists carried in the first cases to be reviewed. Ahead, the future held no promises Ira was required to make. She had been given another life, but this was the first time it truly felt like hers. And when the court rose as she passed, Ira did not lower her eyes.